Good evening. Welcome to the world tonight. It is 5th of March, 2021. I'm Peter with Adam. We have another jam-packed show. I'm sure Adam, wherever mysteriously he's coming from in that black screen, will gladly start off with our first topic, which is an area we've mentioned a lot on this show, and that is Hong Kong. Adam, go it away.
Yes, of course. So, as we have sort of been looking at Hong Kong from what seemed like an already low point with the national security law, all the way back in what would it have been, sort of, summer, August time last year, we are now getting to a point where the erosion of freedoms and essentially the complete destruction of Hong Kong democracy is taking place. So I'm referring to China's new hidden plan to overhaul Hong Kong's electoral system. So, this week, China's legislative body, the National People's Congress, has revealed plans which will overhaul the electoral system of Hong Kong. Now, details aren't fully understood, but we do have some glimpses into what may happen, such as the creation of a government agency which will vet every single candidate running at every single level of elected position. This would mean not only legislative council members, which is the main sort of parliamentary body of Hong Kong, but also councillors who saw an overwhelming pro-democracy victory in 2019 at the local level. So they're really trying to sort of erode any kind of opposition wherever it may sort of poke its head out. So the plans will sort of seek to take power from Hong Kong and those of the Hong Kong people, and instead place it directly into the hands of the People's Republic of China and its legislative bodies and executive. So this whole sort of thing is being done to ensure that the opposition could never rise in the city again, and essentially have it be like any other Chinese city in which there are no democratic voices. I think the final sort of point to highlight in all of this is a spokesperson for the National People's Congress who gave this statement in which he said he only wants patriots governing Hong Kong. Now, patriots here means anyone who will sell their soul to the Chinese Communist Party. So, yeah, it's an incredibly depressing situation in which we've already seen, you know, pro-democracy activists locked away. So, for example, this week, 47 of the most prominent pro-democracy voices have been charged with conspiracy to commit subversion under the national security law. So, yeah, it's it's sort of terrifying in a way that we are, in this capacity to witness the complete destruction of a democratic system, and it's just directly in front of our eyes. There's no real hidden nature about it. It's directly there, and beyond sort of condemnations, not much of the world is doing anything about it. Peter, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, this is an unfortunate saga again in the deterioration of Hong Kong's democracy. I mean, already this week, Hong Kong is going to lose its lovely reputation it had at being the number one economic freedom zone by heritage. They've already said they will not include Hong Kong one bit. And that's something the Hong Kong government has been very much likes to brag that it has the most free index of economic markers in the world. But yeah, I mean, this is a very sad story. But I think, as our Kellic resident friend in the chat is putting clear, this is Chinese reunification. Xi Jinping has very much stated his goal to very much reunify the entire Chinese sphere, and it very much looks like, I should say, candidly, looks like that he has done that. I mean, Hong Kong is not an independent state anymore. The two systems, one country thing is dead, and the People's Republic of China has furthered its grip on it. I mean, democracy, if anything left in Hong Kong, is gone. And very clearly, the next commissioners of the body, or whoever they are going to be Hong Kong, are going to be pro-Beijing supporters who will toe the line. And I think this is interesting in regards to, of course, with Hong Kong now falling into grace, and Kellic again in my mind here, is what happens with Taiwan, because Taiwan is, of course, the next domino in this whole sphere that Xi Jinping has long wanted to get back in China. And it's been the policy of numerous Chinese governments to communist Chinese governments to return Taiwan in all means possible, as pointed at the end. So this is something interesting that many scholars have said that may inevitably cause trouble in this decade, that the United States and China are on a collision course for trouble over Taiwan, as many numerous military studies and diplomatic studies have said if China were to launch a blockade of the island, there would be no effective way for Taiwan to be able to respond back. So it's a very
Yeah,
dangerous.
yeah, it's sort of like an even worse Crimea situation,
Mhm.
because in this example here, rather than just having an overwhelming power which is able to take this region, this island, it would be a situation in which not only is Taiwan having some capacity to fight back, it may not be a lot compared to the overwhelming might of the Chinese military, but it's at least something. And also you have the fact that the United States is backing it very, very closely. A different relationship to what Ukraine had with the United States and how
Mhm.
closely interlinked they were. So this could definitely be something that rears its head up there. I think just another final thing to point out is that we were expecting elections in Hong Kong last September, in which they were cancelled because of coronavirus. Um, it was a very poor excuse from Hong Kong officials to use this as a means to stop any kind of election, because it was at the right peak moment in which pro-democracy voices really looked like they could seize the moment and win, or at least get very close to winning. But now, with the elections coming up this September, it's not going to be a free or fair election. It's
Yeah.
going to be a situation in which pro-Beijing candidates win overwhelmingly. Maybe they'll let in a few token opposition, but it's not going to be anything serious. None of the same kind of pro-democracy giants that we've seen throughout Hong Kong history.
And Carrie Lam continues her services to Beijing.
Yes, exactly. The useful idiot of Hong Kong, despite having a very awful response to the exact situation with opposition voices being able to raise their head and being so successful in Hong Kong, Beijing have kept her and allowed her to stay through all of this, which is
Mhm.
fascinating. Um,
Indeed.
but another, unless you have anything else to
I
add
do
on this
not.
topic, okay, cool. So we go to another increasingly authoritarian situation in Asia. And
Arguably was already authoritarian before
well,
this.
indeed, yes. Yeah, we're going to Myanmar, in which anti-coup protests are really rearing their head. So anti-coup protests have been kicking off in Myanmar after the military overthrew the civilian government of Aung San Suu Kyi's National League for Democracy last month. It doesn't feel like last month. It feels like a year ago with time these days, but no, it was indeed the 1st of February, I think. So what's the situation on the ground? Well, it seems to be people going onto the streets in tens of towns and cities, and are even setting up their own self-governing bodies to sort of defy the military there. These acts of defiance against the military are being met with incredibly draconian responses. The UN has reported that 38 protesters have been killed by security forces this Wednesday alone. It is also alleged that 1,700 people have been arrested, including 29 journalists. So yeah, an incredibly awful situation growing there. As I said, some townships, such as I believe it's pronounced Sanchuan, or again, pronunciations are not my strong point here on
Mhm.
the World Tonight, which have seen protesters set up barricades against the military. And social media has had an incredibly unique sort of position against the military, as it's being used to spread the names and faces of those murdered by security forces. In response to these actions by the new military government, the United States has utilized sanctions, which are set to target the military and its own internal sort of organizations and procurement places. And a really interesting situation has developed in the United Nations, as there has been a clash over who actually represents Myanmar at the United Nations, as the military government's replacement was sent for ambassador to the United Nations, was sent, but then quit due to the fact that he sort of was very receptive to the message of the protesters, and he urged countries of the UN General Assembly to use, and I quote, any means necessary to reverse the coup. So that was a very sort of interesting situation, but that seems to have corrected itself now, as a replacement seems to have been found. But that was a very sort of, I guess, monumental moment for anti-coup protesters, as they saw that, their own ambassador on a very, international platform was able to scream out and say, this country needs help. And you're also seeing it with other embassies as well, as I believe the United States, the Myanmar embassy in the United States actually sent out a declaration condemning the coup. And I believe in Israel as well, the Myanmar embassy was very defiant against the military government there. So a sort of fascinating dynamic growing there. But it does seem like the people are on the streets and not, willing to rest. And it'll be interesting to see if anything's able to come out of their protests, especially because of how harsh the response has been from the military.
Indeed. I think Myanmar, Burma, whatever you want to call it. I mean, I know Myanmar is a more correct modern term. I know some of the older boomers like to call it Burma. Shrug. I mean, it's quite a tragedy what's happening. But again, Myanmar has not been a very good state for a long time. I mean, the military did this 30-some-odd years ago in the original coup. And in the democracy replacement itself didn't work out, as Singh or Jamin Kill. Okay, I'm butchering the name as well. Jeez. Failed in her regard too. So yes, these crackdowns are very disturbing in Myanmar, and at least credit to the U.S. right now for at least there's been a consistent view on Myanmar for some time that the U.S. will not support this incursion against the freedom and liberties of the people of Myanmar. This has been a bipartisan, it seems, thing in every administration since '89. So I think it's quite interesting to see what next steps are taken in terms of what the Myanmarese government tries to do to repair relations with the U.S. But for the most part, it's mostly just been a few couple sanctions and a few criticisms. But for the most part, this process just rolls on quietly and slowly on.
I mean, other partners in Asia have had their own sort of actions. So, for example, interestingly, Singapore, quite an authoritarian country, though in a very different manner to that in Myanmar, has actually, come out and said that there needs to be a situation in, find some way to reverse this. They specifically said that, I believe something along the line of a government shouldn't turn guns on its own people.
Yeah, they did.
Sort of fascinating little dynamic growing there, and other countries sort of in Myanmar's sort of sphere of allies and partners, they're trying to work out some sort of meaningful solution to this. And just a final thing, I think the overall sort of note that the international response to this has been lacking is, overwhelmingly true. But, obviously sanctions can only go so far. In a lot of the ways, they obviously aren't going to impact any real element on the ground, just because the military is going to be losing money, but ultimately they still have their guns, they still have their ammo to use and fire on people. So it seems like a very precarious situation in which it doesn't seem like there's a lot the international community can do. But it's the way it always seems to be with things like this.
Indeed, to use textbook IR, this is the realism of world in reality. But anyway, that was a little too cold for a segment. But moving on, we now move to a topic we mentioned last week, which, of course, our resident friend in the comments and Adam will be very happy in this regard, and that is that the EPP had moved this week to change its rules to allow it to be able to kick members out. Now, this is in regards to Viktor Orban's party, that which is was a member of the EPP. But before this vote could be taken, Orban announced he was pulling his party out of the grouping himself. course, this has now set a new precedent that now the EPP can remove parties from its own internal groupings. It may also lead to the other groupings within the European Parliament, which is the Socialists and Renew, to possibly make their own rules. Of course, this has an impact in that this has been a long process to possibly kick out Mr. Orban from the EPP due to the crackdown and very questionable things Mr. Orban has been doing in Hungary in the last decade since he returned to power, and very much questioning the values of what the EPP's goals are, which is conservatism with obviously the belief of, core freedoms and whatnot. So yeah, Adam, thoughts on this whole situation? We had mentioned it last week, and it took turn this week.
Yeah, so as you state, this is a very monumental thing. Orban's party has been in EPP for far too long, in my opinion. And there's a really interesting element that has come out of this, which I don't think too many people are really talking about, though I have seen it on Twitter quite a bit, in which the Fidesz, that being the party of Orban, he says he wants to set up some kind of alternative to the EPP, in which it's very difficult to try and explain. So he wants to set up a new parliamentary faction within the European Parliament, but the kind of people he wants to appeal to is going to be quite an interesting and broad one. So, for example, this would include, some parties from the ECR, which is a Eurosceptic, more conservative faction, and then you also have ID, which is a more right-wing populist. And it seems like he wants to try and pull together parties from those two respective factions, though no idea who that would necessarily be appealing to. There has been some talks that it would try and appeal to Salvini's Lega in Italy, but again, there's loads of speculation on this kind of thing. So would be interesting if this actually led anywhere, but who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, the interesting thing is there have been parties over the years who've tried to make their own right-wing or right-of-center factions outside the EPP, and they just fail. They fail miserably or fall flat in their head. Of course, the infamous Conservative Party grouping the Tories tried to make when they left the EPP didn't last very long, and probably.
The ECR is still around.
Well, in terms of what they were trying to do in power, is what I meant.
Oh, yeah. I mean, sorry to interrupt, but the whole point of the ECR was so that conservative voices could have a place in governing the EU. They could be opened up into the actual faction.
What I meant,
and ultimately,
I probably didn't say this correctly, was that the ECR didn't accomplish its holistic goal, and I should have corrected what I said formally here. I think my broadness didn't help. In that, because when Cameron decided to do it and became prime minister himself, his ECR grouping really didn't put a lot of pressure on the traditional groupings that are at the commission level.
Yeah, and as Archangelic puts in the chat, it would probably include conservatives similar to what ECR should have been before they got the sort of neo-fascists like Vox and Brothers of Italy, which I entirely agree with. I mean, who remembers the Europe of Freedom and Direct Democracy, the one that Nigel Farage set up?
I remember that very well.
Exactly. Would it be something like that? Who knows? But yeah, there are quite a few on those on the right which have sort of set up, failed, and who knows, maybe it could be one of those. Because a lot of the issues for those in the European Parliament is because the European Parliament doesn't have a lot of power, given the majority that Renew faction has, with the EPP as being the largest, and then S&D has as the second largest, and Renew as the third. Is that they don't have any. If you're an opposition party, you have no real power. Right. You have no real voice. And if he just sets up another group, probably would he wouldn't be getting anywhere as well. But yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, the system that operates in the EU Parliament very much makes a cooperational system. It's very hard to you very much have to try very much not to be a part of the Commission structure in some way or form. But obviously there are those who are not. But for the most part, the main two, if I recall correctly, since the thing has been a thing, have mostly just worked together in terms of rotationing around different bodies of work on the Commission.
Yeah. And maybe they take a sort of approach where they try and join, say, either ECR or ID. Who knows? I don't. Who knows if they would even want him? But yeah.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's right. And I just saw 5-star in the comment, and I forgot to put 5-star in my notes of something I wanted to talk about. Rip. I wanted to talk about 5-star. I just thank you, Arkelic, for reminding me what should have been in my notes.
Oh yeah, of course. Are you sorry? Are you going to go on to this now, or do you want to go on to the AFD first?
You know what? Let's do it now. It's fine. We have a lot. We have time, so why not? We can talk
Sure.
about. We can fill it in. As many. So for those who have no idea what we're rambling on about, former Prime Minister Conte of Italy, who resigned a few weeks ago because he could no longer hold power, was announced as the new leader of the 5-star movement earlier this week, which is a monumental surprise. Came as a surprise to many, but the whole now goal of Mr. Conte's leadership.
Is he? Sorry, just a quick thing. Is he the leader yet? I thought he was just planning to run rather than
Effectively,
actually being made leader.
They've basically cleared enough of the field that I probably feel comfortable enough to say he's probably going to become leader.
Fair enough. All right, sorry. Continue then.
Yes. Giuseppe Conte very much has been given the field. He's first said he would agree to take advisory, and now has stepped up to saying he wants to be, who will become leader of the 5-star movement, which is critically important for them. They've been slagging off in the polls and have desperately needed some revival, and this is seen by some as possibly the chance to possibly do it if no headaches come in this process. So yes, the process would be Mr. Conte has basically been offered the job, and so far no other players within 5-star have said nothing against the idea. So it might be very much the return of Mr. Conte leading 5-star, which polls have shown that if he does, 5-star would actually recover some points in the ground. So Adam, if you'd like to talk about this as well, and hopefully I didn't butcher any of that up.
I do think that the major thing is that he isn't leader yet. As you say, there doesn't seem to be anybody specifically who could come in instead. But for the time being, it definitely is a sort of idea concept. Anyway, so the point is that looking at the polling real quick, the fascinating thing is that let's take this single poll from the 4th of March, in which he isn't the 5-star leader. Then 5-star movement is polling at about 14%. You have Brothers of Italy on about 17%, the Democratic Party on 19%, and then finally Lega as first on 23%. But when he actually is running as leader, it changes entirely, where the 5-star movement is now on 21% instead of 14%, a massive increase. And sort of looking around the edges, Lega decreases slightly, Brothers of Italy barely decreases, and the real party that is hit is the Democratic Party, who goes down from 19% to 14%. A very fascinating situation, and would massively improve the situation of the 5-star movement.
Yeah, but, they definitely need some revival, because the last few months for them have not been pretty, to say the least.
Yes, indeed. I think one of the real issues that the 5-star movement will see for the time being is that the 5-star movement really shines at the national level, that being during an election. So let's say it took place in the next few years, then it would be a very slow process for them, because not much would be changing. They wouldn't be dominating much of the scene in terms of election wins, because the 5-star movement does awfully during regional and local elections, because they're outside of the two sort of block dynamic. You have your centre-left block and you have your centre-right block. Both of the names don't really work considering who are actually member parties, but I digress. At the local level, they would do very poorly, and it wouldn't actually show very well for Conte at this starting point. But again, who knows? Because maybe this kind of thing doesn't actually matter. But yes. And also, who knows? Maybe they form some kind of alliance with the centre-left coalition. But again, the fact they didn't even do this when they were governing with them, I kind of doubt it. But anyway.
And quickly, of course, as noted by our friend Arkelic in the comment section, the secretary of the Social Democrats did resign yesterday, which of course also now means another Italian vacancy in terms of binding parties into fun times.
Yes, that as well. I mean, the sort of situation, just as a tiny brief thing, the situation for that leader was awful in the sort of dynamic they went into. They were on the failing end of a coalition, which just wasn't popular and allowed for the rise of the Brothers of Italy and a very dominant right wing. So, yeah, there we are.
And the ending of the previous government at the beginning of the technocratic government as well, as you mentioned, didn't pan well for them. So it probably made sense to clean house and basically ask for new leadership.
But I think that's enough for our little Italian tangent. The newest segment, it seems, Italian tangent.
Viva Italia. You know, we're being Italian.
Oh, exactly.
You know, Italians love to go on tangents. Anyway, moving on, we move to Germany now this week, where the AfD, yes, that lovely party, the Alternative Front for Germany, landed itself in a very fun, awkward situation where it was announced that the German police would now be investigating them and listening and surveilling them, which, of course, Germany has laws to allow this because of its past with Nazism and the era after that. So, of course, now the AfD is in a fun and lovely state of now being in the Bundestag, but also now being investigated by the same authorities that the Bundestag usually gets to, work with or cooperate with. So quite an interesting dynamic here in this scenario. Adam, you'd like to talk about this?
You must have not seen this, but a German court actually suspended. All right, so basically, just to sort of summarize the situation. So as Peter says, basically, the German government was going to spy on AfD because of far-right extremist elements. However, a German court has suspended the right of the country's domestic intelligence agency to conduct this surveillance, and it's pending the outcome of a legal challenge by the far-right, so by the AfD. So it will have to go through the legal process of if they actually are a threat to democracy, which is the real suspicion. And it's based on things like their anti-Semitism, their Islamophobia, the fact that a lot of their members are dismissive of Germany's crimes under the Nazis, a whole wide range of things. So we'll have to kind of see what plays out there before this surveillance could continue.
Indeed, and I think some of Akrilik again pointed out in the comment section that this has precedent, and I do believe that is correct. I think it actually goes back to the 50s. Akrilik with Adlat on there. I think it was in the 50s they basically spied on the SPD with American CIA help, if I recall my memory is correct here, though I may be wrong, and I tend to be wrong a lot after 4 o'clock on Friday. So there's a reason why Adam is here to correct me a lot of the times. Don't take betting advice from me unless it's before 4 o'clock or 9 o'clock in Britain. But yes, yes, they have done it in the past. For others who are interested, there is a precedent for this to have happened because of the Nazism. But as Adam has mentioned, because this is now in court, I did not know this. This probably happened while I was having my lunch and math tests. In this regard, yes, that now this significantly is going through legal proceedings. Oh, it was the 60s. Okay, never mind. And I take crow on my face, Akrilik. But you owe me. I apologize for you directly for doubting this as well. I apologize.
Anyway, well, yeah. what a Italian tangent to who knows the fact that the courts just stopped the German state from spying. It's the worst kind of spying. Just as another side tangent, we're going to go and talk about extremism tangents now. It's the worst kind of.
Funny thing is that the irony is that the AfD are in the Bundestag, who gets to review the police. It's like, yeah, we get to look at the police and whatnot, but they're also investigating us at the same time.
want to make those local meetings with AFD members probably really awkward if they see any new members. But yeah, I mean, they're a reprehensible party. I would consider them neo-fascist in a number of elements, especially when you're looking at different state parties. So it is necessary, but again, we'll have to see how this legal challenge goes.
I agree with the AFD are a horrible party. As someone of Jewish descendancy, I don't really like far right parties at all.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're not a great party at all. And ideally, it'd be great for Germany if the AFD didn't exist and have a single seat in the Bundestag.
Yes, indeed.
Mm-hmm.
I think just moving on from that, we can go on to an even more depressing subject, which seems to be the subject of this show. We go to our second established, I guess, segment that we actually have. We have Loser of the Week, but we also have the Africa Corner. So today in the Africa Corner, we are going all the way back to the Tigray region, which is an area we talked about a lot in previous months. Because of the sort of internal civil war that Ethiopia was experiencing. To give a very brief overview of what happened, essentially, the regional government of the Tigray People Liberation Front decided to hold regional elections before the central government of Ethiopia wanted to have them. Then you had this. That was sort of like the set of issues, and then you had allegations that militia forces from the Tigray People's Liberation Front, which is a political party, that they had decided to actually attack Eritrean military forces. It's all alleged, after all. Some claim that it was actually a set up by Ethiopian military forces. But yes, that essentially sparked a very large conflict between the regional government and the central government of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, and it has had a awful effect on the people of the Tigray region. More than 1 million people, estimated to be even as high as 2 million people, have been displaced in this conflict, and it has killed thousands. And the conflict has only been growing worse recently, now that any sort of armed opposition has basically been stamped out. So beyond a devastating humanitarian crisis, where many are without water, food, or medical attention, it is becoming clearer to the extent to which civilians are paying the price for the conflict, especially as it has been shown that the previous mortal enemy of Ethiopia, Eritrea, has actually been, allegedly been supporting Ethiopia in the conflict with boots on the ground, which have been razing farms, have been burning homes, have been killing civilians. A very awful situation. So, just to continue on, the United Nations on Thursday has alleged possible crimes against humanity as Eritrean forces have been urged to withdraw from Ethiopia. Just to give a sort of on the ground perspective from one individual, this comes from a Tigrayan scholar who said in a phone call that Eritrean troops had razed villages, cut down mango orchards, destroyed irrigation systems, and slaughtered dozens of people, from young children to the grandparents, in the town of Samra and the villages of Gijet, Adeba, and others. So this is a very, very awful situation in which we see, humanitarian crisis is spiraling out of control, thousands who have already been killed, but also millions in very, very precarious situations, a region which is essentially being destroyed of any kind of agricultural sort of elements. So we may see some kind of element of a famine developing. It's an awful situation. And beyond the United States, which has said they want the conflict to end, the United Nations Security Council just hasn't come to a conclusion. So this definitely looks like a conflict in which nothing will be changing, and a very awful situation will continue for the people of Tigray.
Yeah, I mean, I can't put it any better than what Adam just did. I mean, it's the Tigray conflict. We've mentioned it a lot here. And very sad situation that human rights violations are occurring there. In that regard, and it's just unfortunate. And uh, uh, that at that this has happened, and we've had to cover this again with the sadness that this conflict brings out, and because of what it has occurred. And
yeah, I think just as a final note to add on to all of this, really, is that just as a I guess I wouldn't call ourselves a media organization or anything, but live streaming to you right now, the major reason why we like to cover elements like the Tigray conflict is because it is a place in which millions of people are being affected. Not only does it destabilize a part of Ethiopia, but it destabilizes the entire region as a whole. Just to bring up a story which had actually been a real centerpiece by the United Nations a few months back, was tens of thousands of people going to Sudan. And this real influx of refugees for already precarious and quite unstable countries can have a devastating effect. So it's not just a country or region side thing. It's a very wider thing that can have an effect on multiple dozens of countries. So it's why I hope that something actually changes within the international community, that they decide to reflect and actually respond to the situation going on here. But I think we've sort of worn this situation down as much as we could on talking about it. So as always, we'll continue to follow this as a situation, and I hope you will, as a listener, watch out for it yourself.
Indeed, and it's a very sad moment to see, again, people have to suffer in this regard in this century and whatnot. But again, there are things that we can only just report on and just offer our thoughts, and it's just for others to hopefully solve a solution in that regard.
Anyway, feel free to go on to the next topic now.
Yeah, so moving on something, either depending on your view, a more lighter note or a much more dramatic note. That is, Meghan Markle and the royal family, again this week, had a fun jabs at each other via leaks against each other, with Markle being accused of bullying by former palace staff, and Markle's people firing back, saying that it was the palace very much bullying her. Of course, this saga has very much been a mess since Markle's Prince Harry's withdrawal from the royal family. Of course, depending who you ask and which paper you ask, some have their own conclusions than others. Of course, this mess is even worse by the fact that, one, this has become very messy in public, and that this has also become very televised and full of gossip. Of course, the royals have their own version, Mrs. Markle has her own, and of course, if you ask the boomer, the usual British reader of the Sun or the Times, they'd say she should get the hell out of the country and not annoy the family anymore. But then there are others who say that this is just a Diana 2.0. So besides the fact this is good old entertainment drama that we've now brought onto the world tonight, thoughts, Adam?
Just here's the thing, like, who cares? Like, I think the major reason I think picking this as a topic was good, in my opinion, is because it does need to be shared. But the only reason I think that this is a very monumental thing to talk about is because it shows that people lack any kind of real idea or nuance. So take, for example, the idea that, these bullying allegations, they are, in my opinion, they are probably true. I have no actual idea if they are or not, but, it's a person in a position of power, and you have people who probably don't get paid a lot. It's just the sort of situation that develops out of it. Mm-hmm. But it's being used in a way that invalidates this idea that the British media can focus on someone and really attack them. And no matter what kind of things they do in their life, they will, reveal and leak things that they do not want to share and their consent was not given for. So it's this real awful situation in which people have to either excuse allegations of bullying, or they have to ignore the awful way in which the British media works. And I just think that people should, like most rational people, I hope, use a bit of nuance and go, okay, if she bullied people, she obviously should be, vindicated. Sorry, she should be held responsible for it, and she should, face the consequences of that. But also, the British media are awful in the way they handle things, and they should also be subject to a number of regulations, which I'd love to talk about. But media regulation isn't exactly the most exciting topic.
See, I obviously don't. I'm not a big fan of the royal family in terms of I just don't really get the jazz, but I'm also not a big fan of Markle, so fun world. I mean, this just feels like unnecessary drama being pumped up by certain elements of the media and others. Just because, again, look, I get, look, Markle and probably the royal family probably don't like each other for whatever, the reasons of being or whatnot. But this story, again, is a lot of sensationalism. Again, of course, those who are older enough will point out that this isn't very surprising because of the whole Diana situation almost 30 years ago in that regard. But I think this is just a messy situation. Look, could I believe that she bullied staffers? Yes, because there is a tendency among those in positions of power to treat those below them a little like crap. Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. But I also wouldn't be surprised if the royal family didn't treat her like crap when she was there as well. It's a messy situation that's, for both parties, not very great that this is all publicly opened again, and very much for certain media members like Piers Morgan, for example, having a go with it on Good Morning Britain.
Yeah, exactly. It's really weird that you have a bunch of white men on Good Morning. This is a situation in which I believe you just had 5 white men talking about the situation. It's just stinks of hypocrisy. We don't talk about Prince Andrew and the giant nonce that he is because it's not something that the royal family wants people to talk about, and because of the fact that the media acts in a way that is more positive of the royal family, or those who are nice to the royal family, they don't give a damn about that kind of thing. So it's just that kind of hypocrisy which I hate. So yeah, I mean, it's such an awful situation, really.
Yeah, I mean, it has the Prince Andrew saga. I mean, that was here for like a month and then that disappeared. But the Markle thing keeps coming up when there's someone who literally is accused of breaking laws in 2 countries. Very much not being mentioned as enough. And I think, look, the royals are not a perfect grouping of people. I mean, the royals have done questionable things. I mean, I could go on and whatnot, but I think this is a lot of sensationalism from the papers. I mean, the Sun historically loves doing this because it amps up their viewership of a royal scandal, or the other tabloids. Now, I genuinely don't like media regulation. I wouldn't support it, but I do think this is quite a pointless story that has gotten ridiculously overblown by media outlets. I mean, the only reason I felt that this should be on here is just after this week's messiness, it probably made sense to discuss this topic more, not just because of Markle, her husband, or the royals. Just the whole topic in general is just a sleazeball, as it's to do that. Well, I think Andrew was probably advised by legal counsel Kellick not to ever do another interview again after the car crash that he had with Emily Mace on Newsnight last year about this time.
Yeah, anyway, this is enough royal discourse for my brain. I hear it enough when I'm forced to be listening to LBC. So there we are. People who don't know LBC, just don't research it, don't watch it or listen to it, just ignore it. Anyway, I think we should just move straight on. We've had a very...
I also would advise with the new GB News to also watch your sanity on that, because it's probably going to make LBC look like moderate.
Yeah, exactly. So basically what I feel like, we've had a show, a lot of ups and downs. We've talked about coups, the destruction of democracy, human rights being abused, which is just an awful thing. So let's try and turn to a bit more lighthearted, in inverted commas there. Let's go to the loser of the week. Peter, who is your loser of the week?
Oh, well, no, I'm going to defer this to you, Adam. You had a good one, and you're going to go first.
Okay, fine. I'm going first this time round. So my loser of the week is everyone's favorite contractor of COVID-19, Jair Bolsonaro, the president of Brazil. Now, this right-wing populist has had an absolute love affair with COVID-19, or at least you'd assume he does with the amount of times he's caught it. Essentially, this week, he's told Brazilians to, and I quote, stop whining about COVID-19 as he criticized measures to curb the virus despite a surge in cases and deaths. Brazil has had an awful COVID-19 response. More than 260,000 people have died with COVID-19, which is the second highest death toll in the world. And thousands of people are dying every single day. So, as you'd assume, some kind of government which was responsible would actually, do something about it. But the massive loser that Bolsonaro is, he's just not doing anything about it. And somehow it's still polling fairly well.
Hey, he's still very popular and would be on track for re-election if there was an election tomorrow in Brazil. But hey, maybe people like the alligator that he alleged the vaccines do.
Maybe you just I don't know, maybe people are just masochistic about the way their country is.
But
I don't know. I'm not a voter in Brazil. I can say these things.
Right. Well, neither am I. We're nowhere near Brazil. I don't want any Brazilian fanboys of Bolsonaro with guns coming anywhere near me. Thankfully, they can't. But my loser of the week is the former French president Nicolas Sarkozy, convicted of corruption, and he joins the long list of French politicians who have been guilty of corruption. What a pair, French politicians and corruption. And in Sarkozy's case, a man who, when he ran in 2007, said he was the reformer of France, and very much now has got the same fate that many French presidents have gotten, being indicted and found guilty of corruption. He will appeal, of course, but so far he is, of course, guilty by the court for corruption that was started that started back on his second presidential bid back in 2017, which blew up, and then he got the whole corruption saga. So Nicolas Sarkozy, going from one of the most powerful men in Europe about a decade ago to now basically going to prison for corruption. Loser of the week.
Yeah, to be fair, getting arrested for corruption, a bit of a loser thing right there. Who knows? Maybe Benjamin Netanyahu will be the loser of the week one day.
Who knows? Well, I mean, at the rate we go, Bibi looks like he's PM for life. It looks like at times.
Oh God, don't get me started. I cannot wait for the election special for the Israeli election. It's gonna be a fun time.
Maybe we should just have a live stream of the votes coming in.
I need to cover it for Asia Lex, but anyway,
we can have a special show of Asia Lex and the World Tonight combined in one.
Oh God, yeah, I already have enough on my plate. Jesus Christ. I think we should. Sorry, just before then, I feel like in the chat, somebody, Archangelic, as always, has pointed out their loser of the week, which is them. They said they're going to support the Liberal Democrats in the upcoming local elections and is considering joining the party. Now, as a fellow loser of the week, for I think every week I'm the loser of the week.
Well, you are a Lib Dem by default.
Yeah, exactly. Lib Dems are losers. I get the joke. So yeah, 100%. I'm saying it's an amazing idea. Depends where you are. Support whoever is gonna beat the Tories. Way.
Go big blue conservatives.
And definitely, if you want to join the party, feel free to. There are loads of lovely people in here. And thank you everyone for this party political broadcast from the Liberal Democrats.
I would only say conservatives 13 points up in the polls, and YouGov smashing them at the local elections. That's the party political broadcaster.
Boo! God, you're just like the BBC. Balance for the sake of it.
Hey, we got, I can't wait to see Andy Street and all the other, whatever the guy in Tees Valley is, win decisive elections. And
oh yeah, nobody will forget the Tees Valley mayoral elections. Anyway,
look, I can't wait to see all the fun councils, that fall to the Tories if they're up by 13 in the polls.
Oh God, who knows? I don't. You know what? Don't give me nightmares. Okay, we can just end the discussion there.
And Keir can have his own problems with his own party. When they probably
We get it. You don't need to rub it in. Okay, just have my fun moment.
11 years of Tory rule. It's Britain trusting its party of government.
Oh. And there's a reason everyone thinks I'm the better host of the world tonight.
Hey, I mean, sometimes the hard truths come out.
Exactly, indeed. Anyway, we've rambled on enough
Yes,
about British politics. Nobody cares. The real interesting thing will be the Israeli election. Hope
indeed.
you
And
all are
Dutch
very
election
excited.
as well, even
And
if
oh
that's
my God, yeah, they're happening. Who knew that was a thing? Um, yeah. Anyway, I think we'll just end it there. On a
Sir
chaotic
Keith.
note
I
as
love
always.
that, Arkelic. Sir Keith. That's a mean name, Sir
Oh
Keith.
yeah, right. Nope, I am executive decision. I'm ending it here. Thank you all for listening to the world tonight. I hope you've had a wonderful time, and make sure to subscribe if you've enjoyed this, so you can keep up with some of the other amazing work that the Election Daily crew do. We've had a bunch of amazing interviews on our YouTube feed, so make sure to check them out if you want to.
And follow us
Um,
on Twitter.
yeah, make sure to follow us on Twitter. Make sure to get us on the podcast
Mhm.
sites you use,
And push Adam
wherever
to
they
turn
are.
back his camera on. We want to see that face.
You're not getting my hair. Anyway, I hope you've all
Cringe.
had a wonderful time listening, and I hope you'll join us next week, where we have other exciting things to talk about.
Indeed. Thank you all. Take care. And get your vaccines if you're eligible.
Bye.